This is Antietam, with musket battles at the divisional level. For the video, I'm playing with the labels facing up. Of course, when you're playing versus an opponent, you have the labels facing down, or towards you, and you've got fog of war. I also play this way when I'm playing solo. Helps me keep track of stuff. Now today, I'm going to try something dramatically different. I've got all the Union artillery over here, and I'm going to use it to clear the path to open up the southern bridge. Now you've got Longstreet's 1st Corps here defending that. You've got Jackson's 2nd Corps defending north of Sharpsburg. Here's Sharpsburg. This is the Antietam Creek. On the Union side, you've got the artillery here, Hooker's Corps here, Burnside's 9th Corps here, Sumner's 2nd Corps here, Mansfield's 12th Corps here, Pleasanton's cavalry here, and Porter's 5th Corps here. This flank of the Union Army will just be demonstrating, presenting a threat, while this side does all the work. Lead elements of Sumner's 2nd Corps can just make it to the sunken road. In the event the artillery drives them back, I've allowed room for them to retreat without pushing back and flipping to spend the rest of the corps. Hooker's 1st Corps edges forward. Now again, with division blocks, you'll see that the right flank of Hooker's divisions are exposed on the top of the hill and could be open to shots from this artillery. But that's taking advantage of the larger division blocks. Over half the block is on this side of the hill, out of sight, and I'll let my opponent know that these guys are actually on the other side of this hill. This is done to not take advantage of the divisional blocks. Now the artillery moves. Pleasanton's cavalry comes forward. Mansfield crosses the Antietam. Elements of Porter's 5th Corps advance forward, just north of Dovenberger's Mill. You can see by the slope here that Longstreet's artillery is actually uphill and looking down into the sunken road. The artillery fires. The elements of Sumner's Corps are driven back. Burnside moves off the main road and prepares to back up Hooker. No combat on turn 1, we move to turn 2. Critical on turn 2 is the artillery firing before 1st Corps moves. The artillery is drawn first. You know what? Let's not be silly. You know we're not going to be silly and make Longstreet fall for this trap. Last turn the artillery moved before Longstreet moved. Longstreet would have seen all the artillery up there and would have moved back behind the hill. He saw what was coming. And he would have moved his troops in reserve out of any danger of retreating troops. And Jones also would have fallen back. The Union artillery can see no Confederate troops. Sumner pulls his troops back out of harm's way. He's not going to begin his attack until he hears combat over here. And finally, the last chit drawn is Hooker's Corps, the main attack force. They cross the bridge and hold there. If they cross the bridge and attack, they do so as if outflanked. A less than eventful second turn. Tension is mounting. And now it's late morning. Other than some light artillery fire, the Battle of Antietam seems to be pretty quiet. This time, Hooker's Corps is drawn first. Now again, here I want to show you something with divisional blocks. There's enough room here, half a block width, for there to be a passage through here. So Doubleday will come through here and attack McLaws in the rear. Now McLaws was technically like this, but that doesn't line up right. Positioning like this doesn't change any defensive. If he was in a defensive position, that would be different. He'd stay there. But we're just showing how this is going to fall out. Next to move is Mansfield's Corps. They occupy the East Woods. Longstreet is drawn. McLaws will turn and face this threat. He'll be backed up by his full division. Now this division could, legally, within rules, move up and attack like that, but I'm not going to do that for 2 reasons. First, it's a little gamey. But secondly, and more importantly, they'd be exposing the rear of their troops to Union artillery on the hill. There's a likelihood they'd have to retreat, and retreating from that artillery would have them retreating into enemy troops, and it would just be eliminated. Hearing the hustle and bustle, Sumner's 2nd Corps charges forward. Jackson's 2nd Corps, he sends White's cavalry to make a flank attack. And Franklin's 6th Corps arrives, coming in column up the Boonesboro Turnpike. Now the Confederates get to choose the order of the combat as we enter combat in late morning. This is critical because if McLaws has to retreat, he'll retreat into these Union units and be eliminated. The Confederate player says, no, we're going to fight this battle first. And I can tell you how this is going to go because the attack is outflanked and it's attacking artillery. the artillery fires first, and these are green troops. They do one, and with that the artillery is going to be pulled back. It can voluntarily retreat as well as taking a casualty. There's 2 done on French's green division. Green blocks count the first hit as 2 hits, so that's 3 hits. They're eliminated. Ordinarily, I would retreat from a flank position, but Evans is just a brigade. Even being flanked by a detachment of cavalry, I think I can do alright. But I get pushed back anyway, and the detachment of cavalry and the detachment of infantry, Evans' brigade, are just fine. Now we'll do this combat. Now the Federal troops just crossed the bridge, so for the first turn, they're considered outflanked. Nevertheless, the Confederates only do 1 damage, while the Union does 2. Now the Southern player has a choice. Does he want to move forward with his fresh troops and face a superior enemy, or does he want to flip to spent and retreat back? He's going to hang on a little longer. He manages to eliminate 1 block, and since he's spent already, he'll simply retreat, rather than facing a fresh block. Now this is an elite block, and if you're playing it versus a human opponent, that would be hidden. You wouldn't know that. You're just facing more Union troops. But in any event, he's not going to hold. He's just falling back. Now we have this attack on the hill. They didn't cross a river, so they're not considered outflanked, but they did cross a slope, so they're using the 2 die, the disadvantage die. They both do 2. That eliminates the Union green block and forces the Confederate block to retreat. And the detachment retreats also. They've seen the writing on the wall. Now at the end of turn 3, late morning, as we get into midday, it appears Hooker has crossed the Rohrbach Bridge. In these tense situations, this is always the case of who can be the firstest with the mostest. Will the Union get a chance to consolidate and expand their success? Or will Longstreet throw them back into the Antietam? Now this is a case where there's a million, if not infinite number of reasons why one side or the other would or would not be able to get the upper hand in this situation. Now you could try and parse it out with detailed rules, but even that wouldn't really capture the feeling of being there at the time, the personalities of those involved. The simple mechanic of the chit draw duplicates all of that and guarantees that if you played this innumerable times, the same strategy I'm trying now, depending how the chit draw goes and how the combat goes, it can work out very differently. First draw in the Sumner's Second Corps. They're going to charge those Southerners on the flanks and prepare to receive an attack on their own flank. Pleasanton's cavalry edges forward, and now Longstreet is drawn. Now you can get a very confused looking battlefield if everyone moves individually trying to get the best attack angle and stuff, but if you're using written orders and you're saying, what are you saying to do? These guys are going to reorganize and face the threat, and these troops back here are going to move forward. And this is how it looks. Now when Longstreet's done, his line looks like this. Jackson is drawn next. He recalls his cavalry, no sense getting them lost before their time. He moves his artillery over to his right flank, concentrates D.H. Hill on the hill, and leaves his best troops digging in the west woods. Union artillery still has no clear lane of fire, nor can they move forward to improve their position. They'll hold. Lead elements of Franklin's 6th Corps charge the Confederate line, while the rest of his long column marches up, comes out of column, and is ready to attack in a little bit. And now Hooker's Corps attacks. Burnside is drawn last, and he supports Hooker's drive. And now the Confederate player is thinking maybe they should have been pulling Lee's troops back already, because if this collapses, they can't stay, they're going to have to get out of their next turn. Last is Stuart. Stuart's cavalry moves over here to Jackson's left to cover the retreat as they pull back. And now we go to midday combat. We're going to start here and move across. Lead elements of Franklin's 6th Corps hit Evans' brigade, backed up by some spent troops from McLaw's division. Union does 2 hits, which is more than enough to get rid of the detachment. Now you have spent troops fighting each other. And the combat is indecisive. Neither side is able to hold the ground and drive the other back. In the center we have Doubleday's division with the 1st Minnesota attacking Longstreet's men. The Southern troops are pushed back, but now Hood's men show up. It's going to get tough. Hood's men are battered, but Doubleday's division entirely has been lost. At this point, First Corps has become ineffective, which means it's taken over 50% losses and can no longer rally. But now, a fresh Wilcox's division, part of Burnside's 9th Corps, steps up to do their best. And that finishes off Hood's Texans. Longstreet is not interested in holding this hill. We'll see how it goes. Anderson's division is lost. Jones retreats in good order. That was midday, now it's mid-afternoon. And mid-afternoon means A.P. Hill's division arrives. This is going to be a breath of fresh air. And of course the chit draw will determine how fresh. First is Stewart's cavalry. They'll move as far forward as they can. Hearing howls of success south of him, Sumner sends his troops surging forward.
Heavy rain is falling outside the studio. Sorry about that.
Burnside relentlessly drives forward. Not wanting to be left out, Porter attacks. Pleasanton orders his cavalry around to harass and discomfit the enemy. Union artillery moves south and looks across the Antietam. There is nothing on the hilltops, which is all they can see. And now Jackson is drawn, and he begins his very tricky act of attempting to retreat. First he pulls his bags back. It's tempting to fire at these Union detachments with his artillery, but that might leave them it would leave them dangerously exposed, even if it eliminates one cavalry. White's cavalry detachment falls back to hold a corridor open. Ewell's men are only too happy to retreat from a bad situation. Franklin's 6th Corps drives into Sharpsburg. Mansfield's Corps pushes forward. And now Longstreet. Oh, also, can't forget this. A.P. Hill's Corps comes on. They can get that far and still come out of column, which they do. Now the question here facing the Southern player is, do they unpack bags and try to hold in this little strip for a while? There's 3 more turns, 6, 7, and 8 after this to play. They've decided to do it, but the question is where. They can recover troops within command range. This will do it. Now these troops have all moved, so they can't recover this turn. And for that reason, I'm not going to unpack bags this turn. I can unpack bags next turn. I don't have to make that decision yet. Last we have Hooker's 1st Corps. All his corps has left is some spent remnants here, and Meade's green troops here. They're going to move up. This could be one significant attack. They move the bags forward, but they're not ready to cross the bridge yet. Now these bags are not unpacked there. Nor are these bags. Here's one combat, and Fitzlee is fixing to fight. They each do one. Green is spent. Fitzlee has used his elite status. The Union Ute loses a block. Fitzlee is spent. 2 hits on Williams, whose green destroys him. They do no damage to the Southern cavalry. Stewart tells Fitzlee he's earned a cup of coffee. Turn 6, it's dinner time. Top of the order, Union artillery. Not yet. Actually, top of the order was Mansfield's 12th Corps, and there is no 12th Corps. Sumner's 2nd Corps. He moves his bags forward and unpacks them. Sedgwick's division recovers. And he has Richard's division charge forward into the Confederate line. Johnny Reb is running. Let's keep him going. Now you'll notice from a position standpoint, the Confederates are looking weak. But over here, Lee has only lost 2 blocks. McClellan has lost 6. McClellan's casualties are 3 times the Southern casualties. Ewell's division swings around and reforms. He continues moving his artillery and baggage trains back. Jackson repositions his best troops on the hill, and D.H. Hill prepares to send a stinging rebuke to advancing Union troops. Jackson and Stewart hatch a plan. Burnside's corps drives into the Southern lines. Pleasanton has Farnsworth charge into the Southern cavalry. And although it's tempting, Stewart follows orders and continues to cover the retreat. Franklin pushes his troops forward through Sharpsburg. And now, Longstreet unpacks bags and refreshes his troops. Hooker will not give in and commits to a final drive. And Porter laughs at Mansfield's fate and says, "I will not be so foolish." And McClellan rides up to congratulate Hooker. Is it a premature congratulations? Oh, it might be. Alright, it's dinner time. We'll see who's cooking what. Porter's assault on cavalry. Again, in almost duplicate fashion, Porter loses a block. Hampton takes 2 hits. One is his elite, one he flips to spent, and he elects to retreat because he has Fitzley behind him. Fitzley is spent, but he hasn't used his elite status yet. Ooh, now he's used his elite status. In 1 damage on Sykes. He is forced to retreat. Porter has the battlefield. GHL's attack on Sumner's troops. The attack is ineffective, but they take heavy casualties. Southern troops are sent into chaos and panic. Seeing fresh Union troops file forward, GHL's men retreat. And here we have a kerfluffle of cavalry detachments. The Southern cavalry is lost. Here we have Hooker's last ride. They're charging McLaw's men who have Longstreet's massed artillery with them. The lead Union troops are thrown back. And although it was desperate and close, the grape was too much. Meade's men are out of the day's action. Over here in losses, you'll notice South has 2. They can take 9, so they've got 7 more the Union has to eliminate. The Union can suffer 12 losses. Here is 6 on the bottom row and 2 more on the top rows. They can take 4 more losses, and then they're broke. Here we have Burnside's drive, taking the hill. But on top of the hill, our AP Hills division. Initial combat is heavy losses. The attack is unsuccessful. And over here we have Burnside's green troops attacking some strung out detachments of Southern infantry. The South loses a block of detachments. The other detachments voluntarily retreat. The lead green troops were driven back. As is oftentimes the case, here towards the end of the game the South is in a weak position. But McClellan has almost nothing left to attack with. If you remember last game, I completely forgot about AP Hill and he never came on and the South lost. This game, I remembered AP Hill and he's played a very pivotal role. And now it's early evening. First up is Ninth Corps. Ninth Corps brings their bags forward, unpacks them just outside of Sharpsburg, and Burnside recovers. Franklin doesn't understand what the problem is and sends everyone forward. He sends Slocum up to clear those pesky rebels off the hill. He can smell the burgers frying in the bags here. Hooker, buoyed by McClellan's encouraging words, sends remnants of his corps in support of Slocum's drive. Longstreet is desperate with these attacks. He sends Walker up to support Hill. A refreshed and recovered D. Jones attacks Burnside's remaining troops. He recovers a few troops. And Pleasanton has his cavalry do cavalry things. They charge into the mass of retreating Confederate troops. Porter advises they back those horsemen up. Union artillery moves forward, and Sumner drives on Ewell's division. And he has Richardson's men stop by the baggage train and top off their tanks. And now Jackson continues to pull his troops back. They know they can run the clock out now. Unless Stuart's men, having done their job, save the retreating Southern troops, they pull back. Early evening combat. The final die is not yet cast on this battle. Burnside's exhausted troops drive one more time. But the Southern grape does its worst. That was not Burnside, that was Sedgwick's troops. Sedgwick's troops took a beating. Now on top of the hill. Apparently Franklin was all bluster. His troops have done nothing. What have they gotten Hooker into? AP Hill's troops are saying, come on, bring it, boys. Now the Confederate drive on Burnside's fresh green troops. Well, maybe those green troops aren't to be laughed at. In their exuberance, they push back the Confederate troops, but that was all they're capable of. They're gone. They've exhausted themselves for the day. Now the Union player looks at this and says, I'm 2 blocks away from breaking, so I have no hope of breaking the Confederate army. I have no hope of reaching Longstreet's bags for a quick victory. You know what? This is going to turn into a 2-day battle. Sumner manages a late evening attack, supported by Porter. Longstreet holds. Stuart recovers. Pleasanton covers the Union right. Burnside pulls his troops back behind the artillery. Jackson's troops recover. Smith's troops fall back for a breather. Final combats of the day. These are both Ewell's division. This is Cedric's drive on Ewell's division. Ouch. And now Richardson's drive on Ewell's division. Those men hold. Ewell's division is eliminated. And that is the end of day 1. Does anyone elect to retreat? Lee says no, I think I got this. McClellan is unsure. There aren't many rebel troops left here, but he's sure there's a million more just off the map. His army is exhausted. But Sumner counsels him and says, oh, come on, man, I got him running. Now, I have never fought a second day at Antietam. I'm usually tired and done after day 1. You know, it's a tough battle. But I'm going to stretch this out into 2 videos so I can come back and do a day 2.
Lie your pants on fire. Instead, I'm going to remount my camera.
As for now, it all hangs in the balance. What would you do? Would you have stayed and fought? Would you have pulled back? I'm curious what your thoughts are.